to see how the impact of such a proposal of this directive on rail transport and on overall transport would be. It's always good to have figures and facts. You will present to us that later. And then we will have the statements and panel discussion with the different participants that you see here on the agenda. Alberto Mazzola is the Executive Director of CER. ERFA is represented by Conor Fain, the Secretary General of ERFA, and UIC by François Daven. UIP, Will Peterhans, and UIRR, Charlie Schulze. You see him here on the screen as well. I don't go into the details of the associations. I think you know them all well, but I know that we have already many people from the road sector and from other areas here in our participants list. Some technicalities. This is streamed and recorded, streamed also for the first time on the UIRR website, as far as I'm right. And if you have any comments and questions during this webinar conference, please write them into the chat and we can reuse them with the help of Eric Fain later on in the Q&A discussion. In the meantime, you will be muted with your microphone and your camera. That means you can intervene only by the chat. So this is what we will do today, and by 15:30 we should more or less roughly know if this is a good idea, a good proposal or not, and how the assessment is and what are the next steps to be done. And here, please, I hand over to the primus inter pares, to Ralf Charlie Schulze from UIRR, to welcome us on behalf of you, before we then go into the different statements of the different presidents and directors of the associations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Jens. I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the 5 associations in Brussels, so CER, ERFA, UIC, UIP, and UIRR. The topic of today is really important. It's the Weights and Dimensions Directive. If you could show the next slide, please. We have, and this you are all aware of it, a legislative action which is called the Greening Freight Transport Package. This is to set the scene. This is the context in which we can find the proposal for an amended directive on weights and dimensions. But we always have to bear in mind that this is in the context of the Greening Freight Transport Package, which also came up with an amendment of the Combined Transport Directive, very late, but on 7 November last year it was there. There's a new count emission EU regulation, and there's a new regulation on rail infrastructure capacity management. We really have to see all these initiatives in the context of each other. So we cannot just pick out one. We have really to see that there is a policy objective behind all of these. Next slide, please. The overall policy objectives are very important and to the heart of the Commission. It's about decarbonization of European freight transport and zero pollution, and to boost energy efficiency, and to boost interoperability, to boost operating efficiency of road transport, which is really essential in the context of weights and dimensions. It's about the equivalence between combined transport road legs and road transport on cross-border relations, technology neutrality, promotion of intermodal freight transportation, plus fossil fuel decoupling, reduced road degradation, and long-distance truck drivers shortage. So we really have here overall policy objectives that have to be bear in mind, and we cannot forget these when we do the analysis of the proposals of the Commission. This was just to set the scene. We are aiming for a joint understanding that the elements are all connected and that they are seen together. We asked a consultant, Define, who already did some studies for UIRR in the past and for the City for Europe campaign, mainly on the roadmap 2050, how to achieve the goals of the Green Deal, and which is doubling of rail freight and tripling or even more of combined transport until 2050. In that context, we have already some ideas. We know what we would like to, we have to invest in the future in order to achieve these goals. But I give back to you now, Jens, to continue with the moderation, because I think the heart of the debate today will start with the results of the study of DEFINE. Back to you, Jens.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you very much. And for this setting the scene, Charlie. By the way, when we talk about setting the scene, I'm just seeing here in the chat that a large number of participants cannot see the shared screen. Is that right? So is there any one of you who is seeing the slides, and is this problem only concerning a limited number of participants, or is it for all of you? If maybe someone, no problem, no problem, no problem. Okay, that means we have some participants who maybe have to fix the problem themselves, and for the others it works. That is important because now, Lisa, as far as I know, you have a couple of slides, and would be such a pity if we could only hear your voice and not see your slides. But if this problem is fixed, I would say Lisa Löbling is from DEFINE, and it's always a good idea if people have an opinion to convey and to commission a study to someone who is more neutral to find out a little bit about facts and figures, what the impact is. And I think this is exactly what you want to present to us now, Lisa, and I hand over to you. Many thanks.
Yeah, thank you really much. Thank you for the introduction. I'm really happy to present you today the results of our study on the impact of the proposed amendments to the Weights and Dimensions Directive. One remark to Mateusz, as long as you share, I cannot start sharing, so either I would ask you to switch to my slides or stop the sharing that I can share. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we go. So now, again, you should see my slides. As Charlie already said, the Weights and Dimensions Directive is part of the framework on greening freight transport. It's part of this greening freight transport package. And there are kind of three major aims of this revision that the Commission follows. The one point is to catalyze the introduction of zero-emission vehicles. And to allow this, they introduced a weight incentive of additional 4 tons for zero-emission vehicles to compensate for the heavier drive technologies. But this incentive is also applicable to conventional fossil-powered vehicles for a transition period until 2035. Another aim is to harmonize the rules for longer and heavier vehicles in cross-border operations. So European modular system combinations can be operated cross-border without bilateral agreements if it's possible in the member states. The third objective is to facilitate intermodal operations through the widening of the 4-ton weight incentive for combined transport also to non-containerized units. And the second aspect is to allow additional 30 centimeters of height for vehicles carrying high cube containers on combined transport road legs. So that are the measures, that are the aims of the Commission. Now, why did we want to conduct a study, or why did the associations see the need of a study? First of all, the question is, what is the impact of these longer and heavier vehicles on the road infrastructure? Are the transport assets for rail transport and combined transport suited for heavier units? Are the EMS modules compatible with combined transport, or is there operational complexity? Then the next question is this extra height? What is the effect? Is it really needed, or are already working solutions in place? And the last and maybe most important question is, what is the impact? Is there the risk of a reverse modal shift within these measures? And that is what we did in the study. And the study is structured as follows. It has 4 chapters. The first deals with the compatibility assessment for combined transport and the transport assets for transshipment and for rail transport. The second chapter deals with the impact of the measures on the rail freight products. The third chapter is about the impact of the measures on road transport, looking into energy efficiency, wear and tear of roads, but also the different market segments. And the last chapter is then about the reverse modal shift risk that is contained within these measures. Starting with the first chapter, regarding the European modular system, the longer vehicles, the amendments foresee or propose that these can be operated cross-border without further bilateral agreements, and that the weight and the length are subject to national regulation. So the gross weight can be 44 tons, can be 40 tons, but can also be higher. There were trails in Europe with weights up to 72 tons. The length can also be 25 meters, but can also be up to 32 meters, looking into this duo trailer, for example. And in principle, these longer vehicles offer a volume gain of about 50%, so they're especially suited for the transport of high volume goods. Looking onto the effects for combined transport, there are opportunities and there are risks. In principle, these longer vehicles may enhance efficiency on combined transport road legs, especially for transporting high volume goods. But what we found is that these extended length semi-trailers, so semi-trailers longer than 3.6 meters, are in most cases incompatible with combined transport assets. They are designed for high volume transport, so often they do not have an enforced structure, they are not craneable, and often they have an increased height, so for 3 meters internal height instead of the standard 2.7 meters. If they are enforced from their structure and have the 2.7 meters height, they can be compatible with the existing wagon fleet, but if they still fit into the pocket of the wagon, but only half of the existing wagon fleet is then suited. So in general, this is a major risk. Another point is that these extended length semi-trailers undermine prevailing technical standards. The other transport assets, the wagons, are manufactured according to standard length of these units, and extending the length undermines these standards and bears the risk of incompatibilities. In principle, so the single units can be incompatible, but also the full vehicle combination comes with increased complexity for combined transport. For example, these units, these loading units like semi-trailers and trucks, they need to be transshipped in different terminals. And when there are combinations that carry units that can be transshipped, there's still the complexity that, for example, the trailers need to be removed again from the terminal. So again, a pickup of a unit needs to be scheduled. So using EMS in combined transport comes with operational complexity. And most likely the major risk of EMS is that it makes road transport economically more efficient and bears the risk of a reverse modal shift, thus for combined transport. Looking into the two other incentives that should promote combined transport. First, the weight incentive. The additional 4 tons should be again applied for combined transport, which means that for zero-emission vehicles on combined transport road legs and during the transitional phase until 35, up to 48-ton trucks can be operated on combined transport road legs. Also with carrying non-containerized units, and there's even the option to exceed this weight with national routes. But we then looked into the whole transport system to see whether this is feasible. And looking into terminals, it becomes already clear that they are located on secondary roads, which may not permit heavier trucks due to the bridge structures, for example. Then it becomes obvious that the equipment in terminals reaches the limit when units reach a weight of 40 tons. Every fourth terminal is not able to transship units heavier than 40 tons. More than 80% cannot handle units heavier than 45 tons. And also the units itself come to their maximum capacity. For semi-trailers, this is nominal 35 to 39 tons. For containers and swap bodies, that is 30 to 36 tons. So increasing the weight is not possible and not suitable for the current loading units and the current transshipment equipment. And also, when looking at trains and rail transport of these units, still the permissible axle load of the wagons need to be complied to. And looking into the loading schemes of the wagons, it becomes obvious that here for a twin wagon loaded with two heavy semi-trailers, the middle bogie reaches its axle load limit. If the semi-trailers were unequally loaded, it can even exceed the axle load limits for the rail wagon. And also it is operationally not feasible to have a long freight train loaded with heavy units entirely. The train becomes too heavy to be carried with one locomotive on the current network. So the train would need to be shorter, which is then again not efficient in terms of capacity utilization and also economically less efficient. Looking into the additional 30 centimeters for the high cube containers, this means that the revision foresees to have a height allowance of 4.3 meters for trucks carrying high cube containers on intermodal road legs. But when we look into the transport system today, we see that depending on the relation and the market, 30 to up to more than 50% of all containers carried are high cube containers in combined transport. There are relations even with 100% high cube containers. And on the rail network, this is absolutely no problem. They comply with the C45 codification, and almost the entire European rail network is compatible with that. And since it is that widespread, also for road transport, solutions have been found to comply with the 4-meter height limit. In our consultation with trailer manufacturers, it became clear that a large proportion of trailers are manufactured already gooseneck trailers that allow to transport high cube containers within the 4-meter height limit. And the other aspect is that 21 member states currently do not allow vehicle heights above 4 meters, so that probably bridge structures might not be compatible with increased height. That much regarding the compatibility assessment. Now looking into the effects for unimodal rail transport. Here the weights and dimensions are not altered, but the effect is more secondary. So through the introduction of longer and heavier vehicles, segments or market segments of rail transport are at risk to be shifted to road transport. And the situation is different for single wagon load and full train load. Single wagon load makes up about 30% of rail freight transport and is mostly dominated by a fixed cost structure. Full train load is suited for high volumes of bulk goods and has an advantage due to its scale and efficiency for this segment. So also the risk is different for these segments, especially low density cargo in single wagon load traffic is at risk to be shifted to longer and heavier road vehicles. Less at risk is our captive markets, heavy cargo, and also partially hazardous material. And due to this, and since a significant fraction of single wagon load is light cargo, the market share may decrease due to the reverse modal shift. For the full train load segment, these bulk commodities are less at risk. The overall impact is more due to lower network utilization, for example, for freight transport. How huge the segment at risk is, that is something that we analyzed in the 4th chapter. But before that, we also analyzed the effects of the longer and heavier vehicles for road transport in general. They are often said to allow cost efficiency because they can utilize the weight and the volume gain to allow lower costs for road transport. They are said to be more energy efficient, and they are sometimes known to induce less stress on the road infrastructure. And we had a look into that in detail. And in all of these cases, we had to distinguish between a weight-limited case where the additional 4 tons can be utilized and a volume-limited case where the truck is full based on volume and the additional volume gain of longer vehicles can be used. And in both cases, there is a cost savings potential when increasing the weight from 40 to 44 tons, it's 7%. And when using an EMS combination instead of a mega truck, there is a cost savings potential of 25%. So the higher potential for the low density cargo. Also, in both cases, the more efficient vehicle, the heavier vehicle or the longer vehicle with more volume allows for energy efficiency and emission savings. In both cases, about 10%. But when we look into door-to-door combined transport and rail transport, we see that the potential is much higher, 75 to 90% cost savings, emission savings potential. Looking into the externalities and especially the stress on road infrastructure, the situation is more multifaceted. We see that for a heavyweight scenario, the transport of the same amount of cargo in less but heavier trucks, so the more energy efficient option, induces much more stress on road infrastructure because the stress increases with the 4th power of the axle load. For the high volume scenario, the situation is kind of similar. The more energy efficient option to transport the cargo in less but longer vehicles induces a bit more stress on the infrastructure due to the higher dead weight that then plays a role when the cargo isn't the contributing factor. So bringing all that together, we then in the final chapter did a modeling of the reverse modal shift potential, and for doing this we used the rail transport statistics distributed or distinguished for the different goods categories, because the cross price elasticities are different for different categories of goods. And another factor that is important is whether these goods categories are relatively heavy, so more towards the heavyweight scenario, or whether that is low density cargo. And there are different elasticity values available based on different modeling techniques. They show a kind of range, and we used different models here to show also a range of the segment at risk. And what you see here is the rail transport volume in the different categories with the share that is prone to a shift or probably prone to a shift. What you see is that the unidentifiable goods make up a huge fraction of rail transport volume, and this is mainly due to combined transport, where the goods are not further classified in the consignment node. And for combined transport, one can even make the modeling more granular, because there are different elasticities regarding hinterland transport and continental transport, and also again regarding heavy and light consignments. And what we see especially is that light goods categories, and for combined transport, especially continental transport, and again light transport, are prone or are at risk for a shift to road transport in longer and heavier vehicles. And what does this now in the end mean? Looking into rail transport among all goods categories, about up to 21% of the transport volume is at risk for a reverse modal shift. Looking into combined transport, the segment at risk is up to 16%. And translated into truck journeys, shifting this to road transport, this means up to 5.2 to 10.5 additional truck journeys generated. And this has external effects, emissions of 3.5 to 6.6 million tons of CO2. The external costs are higher, especially due to accidents and climate impact congestion. The energy demand is 3 times higher compared to having this fraction transported on rail or in combined transport. And there's additional wear and tear of road infrastructure. Looking into the infrastructure maintenance budgets, this can be translated into 1.15 billion additional costs for road infrastructure maintenance. And with that, I would like to come to the conclusions and recommendations. So what we've seen is that the goal or the aim of the revision is to promote greening of freight transport. But the result shows that EMS is not cannot be handled without increased complexity, that higher weights bring the transport system and the assets to their nominal limits. The additional height is not necessary to because there are already solutions in place, and that the measures, however, have the risk of about 20% reverse modal shift. So the target of the Commission is not optimally achieved with these measures. The recommendations that can be derived from the results is that energy efficiency should also be a target besides zero emission. Although the trucks might be zero emission, they have a higher energy consumption, higher, and rail and combined transport would be more energy efficient. So also to have this in mind, so that not by promoting zero emission vehicles, more energy efficient transport is cannibalized. Another point is to consider external costs. As we've seen, there are operational savings, but the external costs increase by about the same amount, which is then paid or induced to society. Another point is that standards should be maintained to ensure compatibility of the transport units and the transport assets in rail transport and combined transport. And the last point is that height limits can be maintained, as there are solutions already on the market to allow staying within the 4 meters on road as well for high cube containers. And with that, with the results and the recommendations, I'm handing back to Jens.
Many thanks, Lisa. I mean, this is heavy stuff, yeah. I don't know how a consultant who would have been commissioned by the road industry would have come to different conclusions than that. I think the figures are quite clear here, and thanks very much for presenting that. So I have the impression that our rail colleagues here from the associations will have a word on that. And can I please have the slides here for our panelists, because we will now hear the opinions of the different associations. And if I may ask you, maybe on the stage, all one by one, you will maybe see that we have a very nice stage here in our theater, our combined transport theater. And I have Alberto Mazzola, in the first run, who is the Executive Director of CER, the Community of European Infrastructure Managers and Railways. Can you join here, Alberto? Are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Yeah, there you are. We have Conor Fain, the Secretary General of ERFA. You can also maybe switch on your camera.
Yeah, I'm here, Jens.
You are here, very good. I don't know if François Valavent, the Director General of URC, could already join. If not, he would come later. No, he's not yet here. And we have Gilles Peterhans, the Secretary General of the International Union of Wagon Keepers. Hi, Gilles.
Hi, Jens.
You're also here. Thank you. And then Ralf Charlie Schulze, the President of UIRR. You have already seen him here. And I would please ask you one by one this order, Alberto. Maybe can I have a statement? Can we all have a statement from all of you how you think about that? And I give the word first to Alberto. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. I will follow on how you started this discussion, how the consultant or the commissioners worked on this proposal and how we are evaluating this proposal. Let's say, as Community of European Railways and Infrastructure Managers, we do not object to make road transport greener. So if road transport should become greener, and we don't object to this. What we object, we don't feel that this proposal is making road transport greener. For several reasons, we have seen some of them, and we'll come back on that. But let me say also the fact to provide 4 extra tons for diesel trucks until 2035 will certainly hamper any development of zero-emission for diesel and zero-emission vehicles till 2035. This proposal will work in support of this. Getting to the point on rail, I think the effect on rail is huge. We have seen it. In the conclusion of the study, the impact assessment of the Commission estimates that in 2050, rail will lose 5.5 billion ton-kilometers. This study that Lisa has just undertaken estimates that we will lose, instead of 5, 95 to 145. So there is an error between 20 and 30 times. And I think this cannot be underestimated at all. And this was the feeling we had. Before starting the study, we had a feeling that the impact was much bigger than what the Commission and the consultant developing the impact assessment for the Commission was taking. I think this is huge, and the consequences are huge economically and also on the environment. We have seen on the economic side, single wagon load will be heavily impacted, minus 21% expected. Some cases we had in the past confirm that these figures are correct. Combined transport will lose 16%, so it's also huge. The effect will be minor on block trains, full load trains, but they will be impacted also by the effect of the reduction of single wagon load. So all this, I would say, any ton-kilometer you move from rail to road is increasing emission 9 times, increasing 9 times the energy consumption. So we are going here exactly in the opposite way. And for this reason, we say we don't see this proposal as greening freight transport. It should have been the opposite. Instead of reverse modal shift, we should have a continued modal shift to support railways. But as I said, we don't object greening road transport, so zero-emission vehicles on road are welcome, and I think they should be promoted. But all the rest of the proposal, increasing extra tonnage for diesel trucks, promoting emission gigaliners or mega trucks around Europe, and these things are going contrary to the purpose of the Commission. For this, why we object. I would like also to thank all the other participants, so ERFA, UIC, UIP, and UIRR for taking this initiative, which I think is valuable, and I think we should promote as much as possible, both in Council and Parliament. I think some of the people have doubts on it. We should confirm what are the right now. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Alberto, because you also said you are not against that road becomes greener, but it should not be to the detriment of rail, right? And I mean, seen from the outside, I get a quick impression that you could also call this directive a rebuilding rail on road directive. Yeah, it's longer, it's heavier, and it's doing similar stuff. But we will have here the position of ERFA on this via Connor in the next statement. May I hand over to you, Connor, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jens, and thanks very much to Define. I think it was a very exhaustive study, I believe. It gives, I think, a very good basis on which to discuss. I can only echo the first point Alberto made. I think we need to be clear that we're strongly in favor of making road more sustainable. So we don't see this as, let's say, purely a discussion of rail versus road. I think what we want to ensure is that this directive does not have unintended consequences in rail. I think what we need to keep in mind when we have this discussion is the Commission's Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, which has a target of growing rail freight volumes by 50% by 2030, doubling by 2050. And how does this directive impact these targets? We feel it will impact, in the current format, it'll have a negative impact. We don't see how it has a positive impact. So we think it's important that we are quite open on this discussion. I think it's important as well that we've identified that this proposal doesn't just impact single wagon traffics. This is something that will impact the entire rail freight market, of course, to different magnitudes, but I think that's quite important. And what I really appreciated was the breakdown of reverse modal shift for the different types of cargoes carried. Why this is quite important is we see areas where there won't be too much of a modal shift. But to be quite honest, these are quite often cargoes that are in decline in the freight market in general. Just to give an example, coal production in Europe has declined 60% between 1990 and 2019. And in Germany alone, between the years 1970 and 2017, there's been 85 million tons less of coal, steel, and metal transported. So a lot of the places where we don't see rail too exposed to potential modal shift, these cargoes are going to decline over time anyway. This is not where we see growth in the market. The unfortunate thing is, where we see growth in the market, this is the most likely to experience modal shift, unidentified goods. So what this is quite often is block trains, combined transport, these types of traffic. So we see somewhat of a double risk here. There is the risk that the cargoes that rail is increasingly relying on to actually increase its modal shift are going to be the cargo that is most vulnerable to modal shift. So that really puts rail freight in quite a difficult situation in terms of how we can progress. So I think what we would like to see here really is that we need to avoid that we have a silo approach in this discussion and we look at it from a purely modality perspective. What we need to see is how can we ensure that freight is transported in the most environmentally sustainable means possible. Sometimes this will be road, of course, then we should see how can we ensure road is as environmentally friendly as possible. But we have to look at this from the entire supply chain. So this would be our main plea towards policymakers in the coming weeks and months. Thank you, Jens.
Yeah, Connor, thanks. I mean, you're not saying something different than Alberto, and I would be astonished if, yeah. But pointing out that especially the market segment with a certain growth is impacted heavily. It leads them to a potentially reverse shift is exactly certainly not what policymaker should maybe envisage. Okay, we have normally as third on the list, we have Francois. Yes, yep. Francois, you have joined. Hello,
can you
Francois.
hear me? I had some issues for connecting.
No, you
I followed the beginning of the meeting, but apparently you didn't see that I was connected. But anyway.
This is very good. I hand over, Francois, to you, the president here, the Director General of UIC, the World International Union of Railways.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Well, I will be relatively brief because all this, the finding of the study are really well argumented. And I think the main point is indeed that we are still really in a siloed approach in all those questions. We are really looking road by itself, rail by itself. We don't have a system approach for decarbonizing transport. And in particular, even if within the European regulation, there is a very clear objective of modal shift, the manifestation of the objective, what kind of policy we have to put in place for making this objective a reality, a modal shift, is not really something that is actually addressed. And from UIC, I think what would be interesting is perhaps to have also perhaps an international view on that, since we are also here for doing some advocacy at the global level for this kind of subject. We also can see that at global level, that's difficult to have those modal shift issues taken as a priority for policies. And I do think that perhaps as a conclusion, what is really necessary for us as a sector, I mean the rail sector, and also concerning all the freight forwarding industry, to be sure that we can together have a system approach. In particular, for the road sector, when you look at it from a global perspective, it's not even sure that it will be possible to have enough batteries to actually electrify the whole fleet. And they have huge issues about that. So that means that having in mind that the freight traffic will continue to increase, the question of modal shift will be of interest not only for us, the rail community, but also for the road transport. And I do think that if we can together give a perspective, explain quite clearly and quite pragmatically how we can increase, in particular, the efficiency of the rail freight backbone and its interconnection with the road system, I think that's a good way to try to indeed have a more balanced approach than the one that is today, the one of the European Commission. That will be for me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also very clear. Thank you, François. We will come back on some aspects of yours in the discussion then later. But I think you shouldn't be worried about not enough batteries, because we have just learned that we can continue with diesel in the meantime, which is a very good idea. Okay, thank you, and good that you could join and still in time.
Thank you, Mike.
We have also people holding assets in the sector, and not few assets, and some important assets for combined transport, and they are mainly represented here by Gilles Peterhans from the UIP. Gilles, up to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jens. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see that we have, for once, a very big study commissioned by many associations together, not one for the others, but all the rail freight, let's say, representative jointly arguing in the same way. I think speaking with one voice is an important topic also in rail. I will not come back on what my colleagues have said or what Lise has presented in this study, but only from what you said, Jens, from the perspective of an asset holder or representative of asset holders. Of course, the impact of such regulation, when you look at weight and dimension, while I can fully support with what Alberto has said, getting zero-emission heavy-duty vehicles is a must to address climate change. No question on this. We need to think, and that's what François said in his intervention, we need to see the logistic as at least European or pan-European. And when we have proposals on the table, we always have to look at them from a multimodal perspective, and especially for us from the asset owner, asset keeper, or wagon keeper, as we say. It would be crucial that any additional weight or lengths should not be introduced to the detriment of interoperability between the modes. In fact, neither road nor rail alone will address the need of goods mobility. Neither road nor rail nor maritime nor inland waterways alone can do what it is foreseen in the smart and sustainable mobility strategy. We need to get all together. And when we do that, We need to have this perspective of considering the ecosystem, not of rail freight in a silo, not of road, but of freight transport. I think that's what customers, shippers, freight forwarders expect from us, as between the mode. And in the strategy, if you have rail as a backbone, then if you go to the slide 5 of the presentation, then you need to make sure that you respect the life cycle of the different modes of transport and the different assets which you have in the different modes of transport. And for us, making trailers, semi-trailers bigger, heavier, has a huge impact on what we decide to invest, or where we invest in the last 10 years for the next 40 years, or 30, or 35. Here, apart from the modal shift discussion, which of course we can discuss for hours, how much would be on rail, on road, road only, combination between road and rail in closed containers, in other stuff, that's not the discussion here. Here, if we say there is a need, and the need is European or pan-European, then you need coherence. And that's one of the points, it's not in the study, but one of the points we have said from the beginning. You cannot consider every mode for itself. You cannot. If you do that, you won't be successful. And that's why in the proposal, we need to be clear that we need interoperability between the modes. We need to make sure that the decision we take, also in rail, have a positive impact on road, or we can combine both modes in a way that we address the objective of, Conor has said it, of the modal shift, of having rail as a backbone for mobility, and allowing the private, which we are, to invest in the right system. If I make a kind of a strange remark, I would say, for tomorrow, I don't know in what I should invest. In wagons, in huge trailers, in smaller trailers, and giving in the proposal even the possibility to every member state to derogate is not a recipe for success. It's a recipe for failure. And our concern are really in this freight ecosystem to have an harmonized and synchronized approach for multimodal transport. And I think what we have seen now in the discussion, many member states have the same feeling as we have. So I look forward to the discussion within the council, or with the council's representative and with the representative of the parliaments. And at the end, I still hope that everyone will recognize the need to have a coherent transport system where we respect also the need for the rail system to be able to interface with the road system.
This is very clear, Gilles. Yeah, was this your final remark? Yeah,
that was my final remark. We need to be able to interface. If we develop a system which only one can do, then don't speak about multimodality, don't speak about backbone, then that's where we want to go. And then we will invest where the politicians decide to go.
Okay, many thanks. Someone is noisy here and interfering a little bit. Can someone maybe put the microphone on mute here? I hear a truck. No. Okay, Matthias, can you take care of muting our colleague here? Thank you very much. Okay, that's good now. I have seen that, and Eric, you also have seen that we have a lot of questions got in the meantime here by our participants, and I think we should have a look at them closely, because there might also be some of the proposers of this directive and of others who have a counter argument, you know, who are not of the same opinion. But I would maybe ask to, first, before we do this, the final word here, Charlie. I have the impression you will not say something very much different, but please give us also your point on this.
Can you hear me? Good.
Yes, sir.
I definitely will not say something completely different, because we represent not only the rail, we represent the road, and we represent the intermodal part of the multimodal ecosystem, as Gilles just put it. And would the Commission have said the overall political objective is to protect the 76% market share of the road, I think the measures would not have been bad. But that's not what the Commission is doing. The Commission is telling us that the overall political objectives are the ones of the greening freight package, and particularly for weights and dimensions, it is about more intermodality, it is about decarbonization, and it is about the enforcement rules on road. And if this is the overall policy objectives, our assumption is that these measures are neither adequate, nor are they practicable, nor are they efficient. And I think this is really to be seen like that. We are talking about interoperability and compatibility of the modes of transport to be integrated in the logistics chains. And that's why just one point of the presentation of Lisa is very important to us. It is the terminals, because the terminals are the ones where the modes of transport are coming together. This is where you have this interconnection between the modes, and we need standards, we need harmonization in order, as Gilles just put it, to do the right investments. So it's about equipment, it's about capacity. I won't repeat what has been said so far, but one figure is perhaps interesting to all of you. If you say that the overall transport rail freight today is 400 billion ton kilometers, and if you then calculate what this means in terms of euros, at the end we came to the conclusion that the additional external costs caused by reverse modal shift are of 2.2 billion euros. This is something you have to bear in mind, and that you have to put in the context of these gifts, as I would call them, which the Commission proposes to give to the road. So we have efficiencies, definitely, and we are, as representatives of road and rail, in favor of greener trucks, of more efficient trucks, but you have to put it in the context through the externalities that what here the Commission is proposing to give to one mode of transport in his silo has an effect on society of 2.2 billion euros of more external costs. This is just a figure I would like you to bear in mind.
And
This
Charlie, per year, you say, right?
Yes.
Per year, not overall.
Yes. Per year. No, per year. And I think it's useful to have a clear figure. All the points on energy efficiency, on costs, on externalities have already been mentioned, but these were the 2 points I wanted to add to the speeches of my colleagues. But it's really good that the sector speaks with one voice. And as I said, we are representing not only rail, but also road. And we like efficiency because combined transport takes profit out of a greener truck as well. So if the whole chain is decarbonized on the roadside for the first and last mile, in the terminals, and on the long haul on the rail, or even on waterways, meaning on inland waterways or in short seas, this helps everybody. So the approach should be really a transverse, horizontal one, and not a silo approach.
I think your plea is clear. Many thanks also for that, Charlie. And yeah, you see a little bit the starting divergence of the different corridors which don't fit together anymore later. And I mean, this is maybe then the moment to start the panel discussion, but I would really like to look into the questions of the panelists, because we need also to hear some other aspects and voices, and maybe there are even counter arguments in the different expressions. And here, this is the nice conference table that I meant before. So many thanks, Matthias, for putting us all on one table here. And but before opening this to the floor and to others, I would have maybe 2-3 other questions still to you. I mean, I do not agree, Charlie, that the complexity in the terminals will increase, and also Lisa, I do not agree, because when I have seen the picture of Lisa with all the different possibilities for these modules, I think none of them will ever show up in terminals, because it's just too complex, you know. Then there's just simply nothing anymore in terminals than the old stuff. But this is just a side remark. But I mean, François, and you said no one is against greening a road. But that means, how could we come into a joint corridor? Do we need those 4 tons really for the electric stuff? Or is there an intermediate way to go? Charlie, I thought you had an opinion on that already, right?
So you want François or myself to answer?
Yeah, no, Charlie first and then François.
Well, on the terminals, I would like to say that, of course, the complexity is an issue in the terminals, because if you have longer trucks, the handling of them will be more cumbersome in the terminals. And we have to be careful that the compatibility and the interoperability is still given. And in the terminals, it's exactly where you can see whether the modes of transport are compatible.
Exactly. No, this was meant as a joke from my side, of course, because I mean,
yeah, but it's important to say, because harmonization and standards is the aim of European Union, and we have to help ourselves with harmonization and standard solutions.
And you must also look at all the lost investments then on the terminal side, if this heavy stuff cannot be lifted anymore, and this goes in later back to, yeah.
Or you clearly state that all the freight business has to go on the road and the passengers on the rail. And this is also a statement, but this is not what we understand when we hear that the policy objectives are clearly more intermodality and less decarbonization, less carbonization.
And I mean, we all know that diesel and fuels are not the propulsion solution for road for all time. That means there needs to be some margin for battery and so on.
Definitely.
How much would we need for a low range, local or regional battery truck? Is it 4 tons, or could we get away with less? Maybe
I think 2 tons, which are already in the directive today, would be enough for the short distances on the first and last mile. So 2 + 2 ton is already, for me, something which is not needed on short distances.
Okay, doke. Gilles, question: how quickly does the road fleet evolve, and by when would we then see many of those new and longer and heavier vehicles? How many years? 5 years, 7 years, 10 years?
No, I think if you take, let's say, the capacity of the industry to build new rolling stock, new wagons to address the needs, that would be even less than that. But to address the need of supply chain, and Jens, we should never forget, in freight, the modes of transport exist only as part of the supply chain. If there is no supply chain, you don't need transport. If everything is consumed, produced at the same time, you don't need transport, it's easy. So when we have this, for us, the important is we need to understand how the politics, the one defining the framework, want to combine the different modes of transport. And that's what Charlie has said. When we hear we need to shift from 2, and we see a proposal which goes in the opposite direction, we say, sorry, we don't understand it. There is a problem. We don't see where those bits and bytes fits. We don't see. So the same for us. When you say, if there is a need, if there is a demand, where there is a need, there is a willingness then to invest. So if new, let's say, semi-trailer will come, for sure, there will be companies able to address it, to provide some wagons. We have seen Elrom, we have seen Modal, we have seen different systems taking up. But this had 0 impact and didn't help to achieve the objective, the political objectives. So that's what we are calling for all together, all the different associations, saying, hey, when you have objectives, try to make the policy and the strategy behind fits to the objective, and not just objective on paper. And then when we see the proposal, we see, but doesn't fit, or how should we understand it? And that's the point we're raising also with the study. So yes, within very short time, there might be a rolling stock able to cope with, not sure, depends also on the technicality on the rail in operation, which I'm not a specialist of. But on the other side, when I see also the question on why, the first question in the chat was, why do we see EMS, less trucks making more congestions? Look at the habits of drivers. If you have been once in the road, you know how long the elephant runs will be. And you know how long private cars which see an EMS will take to overtake. So of course, when you introduce new products on the road, expect also some consequences on the road itself, not only on rail with what we have presented on the interoperability or even on the modal shift, but also on the road itself. So I'm not even sure that from the road, we don't have him there around the table, that they are really keen to have a 25 meters EMS. I'm not sure that there is a market for it, but I'm sure it's proposed in the proposal. Yes, that I'm sure.
Okay. I mean, you're making the point also with the effects on the externalities, yeah, and why is it? Why do you think that these external costs? And now I'm addressing myself to François and to Alberto. Why should the external costs really be considered in the directive? Because I mean, for me, it's more or less clear if you see the energy consumption, if you see the additional 1 billion plus external effects and so on, it seems not to be quite well respected or not at all. François, huh? You need to unmute yourself, please.
Well, I think it's a rather classical discussion, and I think we are really touching the moment where we should have this discussion with the Commission, and that will be obviously more Alberto than I that will have this discussion, but that's the same discussion that we have internationally speaking. When you are speaking about externality, you are not speaking about actual money, because at the end of the day, it's not a financial question. It's economic costs. And economic costs, at the end of the day, they are bear by the complex system of our modern society. So we are not speaking about actual money. When we are speaking of something that is sectoral, to have larger trucks, what is proposed in this directive, we are speaking of finance. We are speaking of actual money. We are speaking of actual return on investment. And the difficulties that we have today is really to expose that indeed what we need to have is to have transport mix where there will be more rail. Obviously, they will still have a dominance of road because that's how our modern industries are working. But what we are looking at is roughly to go from a situation where today we have 17% of modal share for rail in Europe to, let's say, 30 or 34. That will already be something huge. But for that, we really need to make clear or to have the good models that are showing that those external costs that at the end of the day never come into the calculation of the Commission, for instance. They make the calculation, but they don't associate to those theoretical calculation actual financial measures. I think we should try to make the point and to show that if there are not able to have some clear measure for producing more modal shift, they will produce so much external costs that at the end of the day, they will have financial problems. Let's take an example that is a French example. You can see what is the situation in the north of France with the flooding. We know that there will be more and more and more flooding. And that typically an externality of climate change. And this externality, at the end of the day, will go on the balance sheet of the insurance company that will not be able anymore to cope with this kind of question. So that's exactly what is happening. And that now that we should have this conversation. From UIC side, and I will finish there, we have begun to push this conversation at global level. So we made a study about how to, in a way, monetize modal shift on the carbon market, and we will have a series of meetings with World Bank to see how we can put that into financial instrument. We can be there this year or perhaps the year after, but at least we are initiating the conversation. And that's exactly where we are. I think that's the question. If we continue to have an approach about decarbonization that is purely, as we say, in silos, no surprise that at the end of the day, we have this kind of measure. So that's what we have to explain, that we are there to take part of the traffic and to avoid those external effects.
Really see your point. Thank you very much. And Alberto, you are also fighting for inclusion of these externalities since ages already, I think. And you have certainly also your point of view on that.
Yes, you're right, Jens. We've been fighting for many years. I think Eurovignette, first Eurovignette is more 30 years ago. And we are still fighting on that, but the situation is slightly better. I would like, before going to this point, also underline when we first discussed with decision maker here in Brussels about this proposal, everybody was questioning why rail should care. You're not involved, you should not care about this proposal, which is a road proposal and make greener road. As we have shown, this has a huge effect on rail in terms of reverse modal shift, and I think it is important as railways that we care with this proposal and we find way to correct it. So that's an important point that we need to pass, because many people, many decision makers think that this has nothing to do with rail. And I think this table around in front of us shows that this is irrelevant. Then getting back to the point of external cost, I think transport is one of the two sectors, together with heating, which is increasing emission in the last 20, 30 years in Europe. So all the other sectors has reduced emission. And I think it's again a good point that we need to reduce them emission, because emission has a cost to society on the environment, and the fact that Francois was mentioning. Many pieces of legislation has seen small progress. Eurovignette has provided a progress on this, emission trading system provided a progress. We had progress in many fields. This goes exactly the opposite way. So this is the way where we were very much surprised, where at least when we stop to the point, and I want to repeat this, if we want to introduce zero-emission vehicles in road, we are only supporting. I think this is something that society should support. We should get greener in road. And so that's the point where we support the proposal limited to this. But when you increase the capacity of the tonnage for diesel truck, when you take out traffic from rail, when you move in this direction, no, this is going the opposite direction. This is increasing external cost. And since these costs are not computed, unfortunately, nobody at the end is going to pay them. I think the proposal to monetize the savings could be something useful also in the future. So if railways is saving CO2, probably should be compensated for that. But this is going beyond what we are discussing today. What we are discussing today, we need to correct this proposal. I think we should limit the 40 tons for cross-border traffic. We should allow for zero-emission vehicles a bit higher. And let me say, if I had to say something on mega trucks, they should get greener too. So they should become zero-emission vehicles. If I had to make myself the proposal, I would say, we support zero-emission vehicles, we limit the 40 tons, and mega trucks, you should go also zero-emission. We don't have these things. This is how I see it greening. I stop here. I think it's something that hopefully we might find a way to correct. And let's see also the effect of combined transport. Ralph talked about this. I think in the member states are now considering this, how much this proposal will impact on combined transport, what will be the effect. I think we have seen in terms of standards, and not only of standards, this is not going very positively. And maybe we need to talk the two together and to find the right way out, what to keep and what not to keep.
Thank you. And Eric, Connor, I will also come back to you later. I have, in the meantime, look at the chat here and at the different questions asked, and I think they are quite interesting. And I think we should also be so fair to give the floor to those questions, at least to some of them. And Eric, I will pick out some of them, because the first here from Jonathan Grau-Möller looks already quite interesting to me. He says, why do you see EMS causing higher congestion when less trucks are being used to transport the same amount of good? Who can answer to this? Charlie or maybe Lisa? Why do you see that these modular systems cause higher congestion on roads when you need less trucks for the same amount of goods? Or
Is
do you
Lisa
see
still with us? Is Lisa
Yeah.
still with us? Then
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Yeah, so there we looked into the effect on of the EMS on congestion, on accidents, as you've already also discussed in the chat. And it's correct what is in the chat. There is not really an indication that they produce more accidents, but that the accidents that happened tend to be more severe. That was shown in studies, for example, that is regarding the accidents. Regarding congestion, that there again, the situation is multi-phased. There is, on the one hand, the option to have less trucks through EMS, because the same amount of cargo can be transported in less trucks. But on the other hand, there is the potential of the reverse modal shift from rail. Then cost savings for road transport, again, have also not a cross elasticity, but also elasticity within the same mode. And also the Commission has it in its impact assessment. When using zero-emission trucks, there might even be an additional rebound effect for the use of zero-emission technology. So within the road transport, the demand might increase as well. So again, additional truck journeys. So there are journeys adding up. In the end, they're not less, but more journeys. So congestion increases, but the calculation that we have done, the value, the external costs due to congestion, they come from the external cost evaluation based on the handbook published by the Commission. So instead of using rail, having the shift to road transport, that has an effect on congestion, that are the external costs that we calculated.
You mean that this higher efficiency and the lower cost, they suck formally the more load on road? Yeah, clearly. Thank you. We have Eva Ptaszinska, and I hope I pronounce it correctly here. What were the assumptions? And I think the question also goes to Lisa. What were the assumptions for calculating reverse modal shift? It seems that one of the assumptions is that these EMS will be used everywhere in Europe, where the factories and distribution centers are, which isn't far from being appropriate. She says the same for the 40 tons and so on. They will not be used everywhere, but only among member states who allow them, and only in a transition period. That, if I read that correctly, she thinks the problem is much smaller as you make it. What's your position on that?
Yeah, I've also seen that question. I'm happy to comment on that. The evaluation that we did was to take into account the savings potential that heavier trucks and that EMS, so higher volume, allows, and then to see what the potential is for the reverse shift. So we didn't look into road, so we did not assume that every road freight transport operation between factory, shuttle services, whatever, are performed in EMS, but we only looked into the segment or the share of a rail freight transport that can be transferred to road if these savings materialize. And of course, not everything in the end will be performed in longer and heavier trucks. But still, this is kind of the segment at risk. If every member state, if EMS would be possible for cross-border everywhere, if the different member states do not allow EMS, this cost savings cannot materialize. Yeah, and as well, there are trials currently in the different member states, but they're restricted in time. and they are restricted to the member states. So this is not really a situation that is comparable in a way.
Okay. And the other part of the question is, which member states have you taken into account? All member states, some member states, big member states? Can you precise that?
We use the statistics for rail transport in these goods categories, and we used every member state that was available on Eurostat. So every member state that reported was taken into account.
Okay. So you have a quite broad view in the end of that. That's good. Thank you. Okay, I will come back to one of those questions, to one to them a little bit later. An intermediate question to Connor. What do you think do the customers want? And many thanks, Lisa, for the explanations here. Connor, what do you think? What do the customers need? Do they want, or is there a needed market for this kind of truck and this kind of volume and this weight? Or Ralph, Charlie, do you want to take the question? Who is the more appropriate?
Oh, Connor first. You addressed him, but I can add something for it.
In terms of logistics supply chains, it depends what you mean. I could imagine if you're used to using unimodal road transport, potentially interesting, but I think if we're looking at growing intermodal or use intermodal, I'm not sure. I do see, what I would see as one of the big risks here is when we do look at prices, for instance. What we could see here for unimodal transportation, this significantly brings down the price. If you're allowed to, let's say, heavier loads, obviously the natural question might be, why doesn't rail just react to this? The reality is, though, rail is quite a capital-intensive sector with very low margins, and the other factor is, it's quite regulated. If I'm operating a block train, I can't just go, I'll react by sticking an extra 10 wagons on the back of the train. Usually you're operating at infrastructure parameters that cannot just be easily adjusted. Even if we did decide to adjust them, we're probably talking that takes 10, 15 years. In the meantime, we've had to deal with this competition distortion that's introduced. So the risk I would see is that this could, the incentive for unimodal transport could be greater than the incentives for multimodal transport within the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We are 7 minutes to the end of this webinar. I have the impression that can be only a kind of start of the overall discussion on this, because it's completely impossible to cover all the aspects today. We would even have prepared some questions here for polls and so on. I have no idea how far this is really needed at the moment, because I would like to spend 2-3 minutes on the way forward, because now we have a proposal on the table, it's under discussion, and you are not very happy with this, or you are completely against it. What are the most important things that need to be done now in taking further this discussion? Gilles, maybe starting with you here. What are your most important things and changes or critical points that need to be addressed now?
I mean, apart from what we have discussed, let me perhaps also, I see Andreas Nolte.
How would you do it?
Yeah, Andreas Nolte said it's not only about intermodal transport. Of course not. I mean, most of the heavy-duty vehicles which are running across Europe don't have a container on it. They are closed. If you look on the highways, there is no container. So it's about the whole rail freight system. Again, I'm repeating myself, but we can discuss about the impact on road safety. Is it how much? Modal shift, how much? That's not the point. Do we want a coherent European policy? Yes or no? We are asking since 25 or even more years for 22.5 ton per axle. In the Nordic countries, they have even more. In continental Europe, we were unable to achieve that. And it seems even more complicated to achieve 22.5 ton axle load on rail than plus 4, not 2, 4 tons on road. So what we ask for is just coherent policy that we understand where we have to invest and respect the idea and the need of the shippers to have a multimodal supply chain. Meaning, what I want to transport, I need to be able to transport it not only on road, but also on rail. And if I want to put a trailer on a wagon, they need to be compatible. And if you create rules where you allow member states to, let's say, derogate as they want to assist them, you will not achieve the objective. You will have, even in the chat, yes, zero-emission vehicle will not come tomorrow. Yes, exactly. Rail is here. Rail is here. So just use what you have if you want to decarbonize. Allow the introduction, facilitate the introduction of heavy-duty vehicles, zero emissions. Yes, ZEPHES project and others. We support it. But don't create positive discrimination, because that doesn't help.
This needs to go into the next discussions,
Yes.
I think, then, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Charlie, I will give you the last word here on this. François, what needs to be done in the next steps here to get out of this dilemma?
Well, that's a tough question, but I think that both Alberto and Giles are part of the solution. I think that we need really to explain that we need to promote systemic change, and that we cannot have a directive that is only on the road without thinking to the rest of the transport chain, and that's exactly what the Commission should do. The Commission should have a global vision. Okay. Apparently, they don't have, and we should be there to explain them how we can do it. And the only thing that I would add is that we have collectively, and what we are trying among associations, between also UIC and UIP, to make our homework to be sure that indeed the so-called rail backbone is actually performing as it should. Well, we have the BP project at UIC, and we hope that we'll be able to have you on board at some point. That's what we should do.
You must be able to step into the position of an alternative, of course, absolutely. Yeah. Alberto, what are your next endeavors to continue this discussion and to bring it on the right track, what road?
I think the Commission made this proposal. Now it is under analysis in the Parliament and the Council. Parliament is going to vote soon on this proposal, and I think we need to act, all of us, in members of European Parliament, explaining why we care for this proposal and what is right and what is wrong. So I think it is important that we pass this message and because this is not, let me say, was not so well understood, because the explanation that has been given is that this has an effect of 1% to the rail market. We have seen the effect is much higher than 1%, it's 20%. So we need to explain this, and we need, in explaining this, say why railways are caring for this and why we are proposing certain measures. As I said, I think on zero-emission vehicles, we should only support. If they come in 5 years, they come in 5 years, but we need to support and they need to get greener. But on the same time, I think, and we need to make clear, the targets are to increase also rail transport, not decrease, to increase. And these measures should help also to increase. If they go the opposite, I think is not correct. I think we need to defend combined transport, the combined transport proposal, which we need some support and understanding, putting the two things together. And let me say, we just got the agreement of Trans-European Network, where we are pushing for multimodal things, integrating railways and ports, integrating railways and airports, integrating urban nodes, terminals, and so on. Also inland navigation together, maritime. So all these things that we are going to invest in the next years, billions, should be used for this, and not goes the opposite. We invest, otherwise nobody. So it's not simple, but I think in the next months, we have some work both in Parliament and Council on this.
I understand. Many thanks. And I come closely to the finishing line here, the straight line. I think we can allow 5 minutes of overshooting. But Charlie, I mean, there was a question here in the chat that has not been discussed here today, but from Paul Hodgson, who says, any comments from the panelists on the interaction between the weights and dimensions and the combined traffic directives? Is there something you can say here in short words, maybe just as an information to all?
Clearly, I can, because we were asking for the connection between the different elements of the greening freight transport package. And one common point here, which joins also the overall policy objectives, are, of course, the externalities, because the externalities are reality today. And we would like to reduce this burden of the society and not to increase it. So combined transport, the Commission has proposed a definition based on external costs. Whether it is feasible or not, we are still in analysis of it, but it's very clear that if you do on one hand side say that you want to reduce external costs, and on the other side you come with a proposal where you stick to your silo, it's not coherent. So what we are asking for and discuss also with the parliamentarians and with the council is to make it more coherent in order to be sure that the mentioned overall objectives, which I presented in the beginning of the meeting today, that they're really taken seriously, because you can only regulate if you have a clear goal or target behind. And what we see here in this proposal, that it falls apart from the other three proposals of the greening freight transport package. So it's really unilaterally increasing efficiency of one mode of transport without taking into consideration that it could be even better if you combine it in the logistics chain and if you integrate also other modes of transport. This would be my conclusion for the moment. Of course, the discussions are going on with the Parliament and with the Council. I would like to thank Lisa for the study, because I think this is a good basis for discussions. It is objective, it is clear where our concerns are, and we hope that with this study we will be able to convince also parliamentarians and the Council to come up with the next and right amendments of the amendment.
There you are involved in the discussions. Thank you very much. Yeah, also for my part, thanks to Lisa for the substantial input here into this, which will certainly all help in the further discussions. We don't have the time to go into all the sometimes questioning comments here in the chats. Some people also say, hey, there are but these immense effects on transport if you look at the member states who are already testing that or doing that. So maybe this is something you have the chat here recorded, and so maybe you can use this for giving some answers or integrating these aspects into the discussion. We have even here in the chats, we have even a very positive proposal here. Wolfgang Jaliuk from the Lemberger Linien says that they have a number of technical organizational proposals on how to improve the shift to railway, and they will send them in the second half of the month for discussion. I think you will be all happy to receive that. And for me, this seems to be just a kind of start of the journey. So if you don't have a kind of 30-second final statement that you want to make here from you, the panelists, then I would say the conclusion is the happiness is limited because of the lacking overall approach. You see silos, you see the external costs. We have some doubts that the impacts are really as severe as they are pointed out by the study, but this can certainly be discussed. In any case, the coherence of the system seems to get to start diverging, something like that, yeah. And please raise your hand if you have a last comment to make, because if not, I would close this here for today with big thanks to you. And
just one point, Jens. The presentation is available. There will be a press statement this afternoon, and of course, all the questions in the chat will be answered. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else? Still a very last statement? No, everything has been said. Thank you. The announcement here to make is, besides the availability of the slides and that the questions will be answered, which is quite fair, I think, that there will be a follow-up, as far as I have learned, right, Charlie? That means in some weeks we should convene more or less in a similar circle, and everybody is invited to follow up the discussion and the evolution, because that's not yet the end of the story, as what we have learned.
No, it's the starting point, yeah.
It's a starting point. So you should use the opportunity to be updated regularly, and also you, the panelists, should have the possibility to convey the right messages, maybe even also with some of the proposers next time that we can have a pro-cons discussion on the panel itself. For today, thanks for all your inputs and your availability for this. And we can leave in the meantime, something like 200 participants into the rest of the afternoon. Thanks for all the technical team. Again, thanks to Lisa for being present here and for showing us this. And I think Charlie and you all, you will then let everybody know via the usual channels of communication how this will go on, right? Okay.
And let's speak with one voice. Thank you.
And let's speak with one voice. And this is also, especially as a joint sector here, a very good thing to see. Thanks for your participation. We close the session, and I hope that we will reconvene in a couple of weeks in the same circle. Many thanks to you, all of you.
Thanks for the moderation. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thanks. Bye-bye.